The doors to the young mistress's chambers opened quietly, and someone entered the room. The weather was raging outside. Large raindrops sounded through the windows of the room, and they froze on the fly, turning to ice. A maid entered. She went quickly to the window and closed the weighty curtains with a sharp, deft movement of her hands. Yes, it's much cozier this way. The young mistress walked over to the fireplace to warm up a little. But it was very cold in here. The fireplace was not burning. Realizing that she could not get warm by this empty fireplace, the girl took the lantern in her hands and confidently declared that now she was ready. The legend of the blue flame. When the kingdom of Geraint was first formed, there was a legend that a great archmage helped the king and betrayed all his enemies to the blue flames. Only it happened that with the death of King Ephron Geraint, the archmage himself fell into oblivion. However, he left behind one prediction, and it was as follows. If anyone speaks my name again, I will rekindle the blue flame for his sake. Many years later, the northern lands of Errol, the mysterious man in the dark hood sighed, puzzled, sensing someone else's presence in the room. Then he turned his head sharply and froze in a stupor. Who is he? And what was going on? Who are you? He asked in surprise, staring at the red-haired girl who had appeared unexpectedly and sat down businesslike on the chair directly in front of him. Pleased to meet you, Mr. Archmage, the young lady said calmly and gave the hooded man her radiant smile. And after that, the Archmage's real name was spoken. What a miracle! The hooded man interjected as he was just called. And who the hell are you? The Archmage rushed sharply to the girl with a question. From such suddenness, the lady recoiled aside and shrieked. Indeed, who was she? The red-haired beauty herself had been asking herself that question a lot lately. The answer was on the surface. In this world, she is nothing but a common villain. Adeline was an ordinary office plankton in Korea. It was like that until one day she was sent on a business trip where she was involved in a plane crash. When Adeline opened her eyes again, she realized that she had been reborn. And now the girl was a character in the novel Lady Catherine. What a marvel! This novel is a work about a sweet but unfortunate girl who captured the hearts of 5 men who hold high positions in the kingdom. However, Adeline did not take the place of the main character Catherine. She did not become the protagonist's fish, nor did she become some sort of secondary character. Adeline has been reborn as a girl villain who never managed to kill Catherine. Now she is a red-haired beauty named Averia Oberton. As the Duke's most precious child, Averia seemed to have everything. But her beautiful looks and distinguished family background hid a bad temper. And what Averia certainly didn't have was a loving fiancé. This was because Crown Prince Cassian was only interested in Catherine. Averia tried to kill the protagonist, hoping that he would change his intentions. However, her plan turned out to be so dubious that the girl was caught almost immediately. Averia, after all this, Cassian called her just a horrible woman. How could you ever think of killing Catherine herself? The Crown Prince asked Averia. What nonsense, the girl thought as she sat in front of Cassian with the most nonchalant expression on her face. So Catherine's first fish is Crown Prince Cassian Geraint. By the end of the novel, he becomes king and husband to the protagonist. Having moved into a new body, our villainess concluded that poor Averia had no knowledge of men at all. Do I have to be like the real Averia and be a fan of the Crown Prince? The girl thought dejectedly. For some reason, it seemed to her that Cassian would be fine with Catherine. But what about Averia's own happiness? It seemed like a pretty good option that she could spend the rest of her life as the Duke's daughter, doing nothing but partying and eating as much as she wanted. Wow, that's a dream come true. And anyway, what good could the love of some man from a piece of paper be? Looking directly into Prince Cassian's eyes, Averia stated that what she was doing was not murder. In the girl's opinion, it was only an attempt, since Catherine didn't die in the end, after all. What are you even saying? The Crown Prince was genuinely perplexed and indignant. Averia, however, was not going to make excuses anymore. Instead, she smilingly offered Cassian to break his engagement to her. She was going to leave the high society and live her life in peace. "Is that enough?" she asked, rising from her seat. Still with a surprisingly nonchalant expression on her face, the girl quickly followed towards the exit. She walked past Cassian as if he were a complete blank slate for her. The Crown Prince was shocked at what was happening. He escorted Averia with a dumbfounded look. "It turns out that—" he started to say, but Averia interrupted the boy. Cassian stared in amazement at the departing girl. She turned around at the door and said they would never see each other again. After the engagement to the prince was broken off, the Duke of Oberon exiled Averia to one of their family estates in Arella. It is a very cold and desolate place located in the far north, and up until a certain point, Averia thought it was perfect for her lazy life. Finding herself by the empty and cold fireplace, the girl abruptly changed her thoughts on the matter. "Me! No one told me it would be this cold!" wailed Averia, wrapping herself in a woolen plaid. In a trembling voice, she asked the maid if they really lived in such conditions. But instead of answering, the maid gave her a sympathetic look and offered to bring her some more warm tea. But Averia wasn't interested in tea. She was more concerned with why there was no fire in the fireplace. "Oh, you'd freeze to death." The maid was a little confused at first. Then she explained everything to the young mistress. According to her, the only trees that grew on the Errol estate were black acacias. But they were so dense that they were not suitable for firewood. As a result, there was no choice but to rely on imported wood. The maid also revealed that a week ago, the Okal Company, with whom they had been partners for 100 years, suddenly broke off their partnership. "Doesn't that company belong to the first prince's family on his mother's side, the House of Melial?" clarified Averia. The maid replied that was correct. The first Prince Leiden Geraint lost his mother, who came from an earl family quite early, so he became an unlucky prince, who lost his position as crown prince to Cassian, whose mother came from a ducal family. The crown prince's relationship with Averia was terrible, and he should die right after the wedding of the main characters. But there was one but. He committed suicide, just like Averia in the novel. That's why the present-day Averia felt sorry for him. But how did he have the courage to stab her in the back? A hurricane of anger was just raging inside the girl. The girl felt that if Leiden Geraint was so sorry, he should have handled the situation instead of hurting Arel. "It can't be helped." Averia sighed doomily and asked her maid Emma to toss some ebony wood into the fireplace. The maid looked at her mistress in bewilderment. What was she already up to? Averia, on the other hand, asked the girl not to worry and emphasized that she had some trump cards up her sleeve. That was the preface. Returning to the beginning of the story, Averia called out the name of the great archmage she had read about in the book. "Theoharis," the girl said, sitting in a chair in front of the hooded man. Averia had absolutely no fear. She looked at this mysterious guy with a smile. "Perhaps I should call you Demon Theoharis," she asked, still smiling. And the archmage removed his hood in front of Averia. Wow, what an unusual appearance! The white hair and red eyes combined spectacularly and inspired some strange feeling. The young man, Archmage Theoharis, looked at his unusual guest in silence. So the great Archmage, also known as the founding hero, was actually a blue flame stone demon. Geraint, the founding king, signed a treaty with him to establish the kingdom. You're the descendant of that idiot who wanted to be king 100 years ago, right? The Archmage inquired, adding, puzzled, that her energy was completely different. Averia asked if she could make a wish before giving an explanation. "I need the power of your flame," the girl said, and Theoharis only grinned. "My flame? Good," he pronounced. But Theoharis wanted to know what the girl wished to gain from this flame. Money, fame, or maybe power. "Say just one word, and I'll burn them all to the ground," the Archmage said smugly and smiled. The girl confusedly explained that she just needed ordinary fire. "What?" said Theoharis, taken aback. It seemed that such a strange answer was the last thing he expected to hear. "I wish there was a fire. "It's awfully cold in here," said Averia. The girl confessed that she would very much like to light the fireplace, but the wood would not burn. "If you light it, you may be free afterward," she declared. Averia looked at Theoharis expectantly. "Come on," she coaxed him. The girl asked the Archmage to just light the fire and leave quickly. Theoharis was shocked by what he heard. Surprise, bewilderment, shock. It was red on his face. Realizing that action would not wait for her, Averia said that in that case the Archmage could leave. "No, I can't," Theoharis objected. Averia smiled sweetly and asked him again what he meant. With slow steps, Theocharis approached the girl. "You didn't know?" he asked, somehow ominously. Theocharis put one hand on the girl's knee and hovered over her. Averia froze in place, afraid to move. "The demon you summoned is only on a lifetime contract," the Archmage explained with a smile and looked intently into the girl's eyes. At the same moment, the fire in the fireplace lit itself, and the logs crackled pleasantly, warming my soul even with that sound. It was immediately warmer. Averia sighed in relief and leaned back in her chair, relaxed, and said that now she could live. Archimagus Theocharis sat down in the chair opposite. "I thought the flame would be blue, but it's not that blue," Averia remarked aloud, looking at the orange flames in the fireplace. After saying that, the girl laughed out loud. Averia then made a serious face, and turning to the Archmage, she noticed that he was talking about having to fulfill the wishes of his summoner for the rest of his life. The girl also wondered, ironically, if demons were that stupid. "I'm usually paid in blood for this. War, pleasure. The jerk who became king gave me his firstborn son," replied Theoharis. "You're the first to summon me without paying a dime for it," the Archmage remarked in surprise, and asked how the hell Averia had done it. The girl assumed it was because the demon's name had been erased by the gods from the minds of people all over the world. Averia agreed aloud to take charge since she had summoned Theoharis. The Archmage jumped up from his seat. "Oh, really?" he asked excitedly. With a predatory glint in his eyes, he wondered if the girl would let him fight and destroy. "I'll give you rations and a bunk," Averia said in a tone that stunned Theoharis. The Archmage seemed to realize he was in trouble. He knelt down on his knees on the floor and clenched his fists in despair. Averia wondered if Theocharis really wanted her to entertain him. What are you good at?" Theoharis inquired with a sly smile. But Averia did not respond to that, and once again reminded the Archmage that he must honor her wishes unconditionally. "Then how about this? I wish you to not eat or rest, but just stand there facing the wall," the girl stated, and pointed her finger at the wall. Theocharis was indignant that this was too much. The realization of the predicament he was in made the Archmage clutch his head. He was afraid to even imagine his fate if people behaved this way. Averia mentally concluded that if you looked closely, this guy was very handsome. She was more attracted to the prospect of taking care of Theoharis than the crown prince. "Theoharis," the girl addressed the Archmage. The boy, on the other hand, didn't dare to look up. He muttered something to himself about how cruel the girl was. Hearing Averia's call, the boy asked to be called not Theoharis, but simply Harry. "Then, Harry, I want to make a wish," said the girl again. No. I won't think about fighting anymore, and facing the wall I don't want to," Theoharis wailed. Averia emphasized that that wasn't what she meant. The girl asked the Archmage not to kill her, but on the contrary to protect her. Such words surprised Harry. He remarked aloud that he could not harm the summoner anyway. "Then don't let me die," Averia asked. The girl was about to wish for something else. "What else?" asked Harry, and plumped back in his chair, ready to listen. Averia wondered if he could change his appearance so that he wouldn't stand out. It's just that, according to her, he's too handsome, and therefore very conspicuous. "Do you think I'm handsome?" he asked again, approaching the girl. Averia wondered why he was so surprised. She was sure it wasn't the first time she'd heard him say that. "I thought you didn't notice my beauty. That's why you look so indifferent," the Archmage said, flashing a sly look. But he still had to listen to the lady's wishes. Theo Harris rose from his seat and spun deftly around himself. Wow, what a miracle! In front of Averia's eyes, Theocharis was transformed into a beautiful, beautiful, snow-white dog. Demons are known to possess a soul number that connects their souls, and they can also change their appearance if necessary. "So how do you like my powers?" Harry asked with a paw raised. Oh, that really struck a chord with the girl. She stood there in complete admiration. Averia stroked Harry's head, noting that the transformation into a dog was very cute. "Oh, he's so soft!" The dog immediately shook his head. "Don't you know that's too intimate a contact?" asked Harry indignantly. Theo Harris scratched his paw behind his ear and wondered how Averia was going to explain to the others where the fire in the fireplace had come from. "Well, I'm a wizard," the girl replied. The dog looked at Averia in surprise. A mute question and bewilderment was in his eyes. He didn't seem to understand what the girl was talking about. Harry walked over to Averia and sniffed her thoroughly. Your magic power's about 0.5 tenths? He asked, puzzled. The girl nodded affirmatively. In this world, wizards can control the magical power in their body and use it as well. The greater the magical power, the stronger the magician. However, it is an innate quality, so it cannot be changed or improved. Usually, magical power is measured right after a child is born. Averia's was 0.5. Much to her dismay, Averia couldn't even light a candle with her power. Compared to her, the main character, Catherine, was a true professional with her 9 points. However, the girl was still going to explain the appearance of the fire precisely by her power. In her opinion, a mere servant would not say anything to the Duke's daughter. She stroked Harry's belly with those words. The Archmage in the dog's body hesitated. Somehow he was sure it couldn't be that simple. Soon, all the servants of the manor were gathered in the hall with the fireplace. They were staring at the fire as if they had never seen such a miracle before. Did they really believe it? The dog wondered to himself. The servants sat down by the fire and marveled at the talent and splendor of the lady. They were amazed that the black acacia tree had actually caught fire. The cook expressed the hope that at last this tyranny might end. Harry marveled at such joy over a simple fire. Averia stated with a smile that this flame came about due to her persistent prayers. "You can consider me a sorceress, right?" the girl asked smugly. The butler wanted to say something about Madame's level of magic, but immediately changed his mind. He probably thought it was better to enjoy the warmth while he could without thinking about its origin. Oh, they finally paid attention to the snow-white dog sitting peacefully next to Averia. One of the servants inquired as to what kind of dog it was. The girl hoped that the dog would just be ignored. But those hopes were just silly. How could such a handsome dog be overlooked? Averia answered that she picked up the dog on the street because it seemed to her to be a stray. According to the girl, she felt sorry for him and decided to take him in. Harry barked, once in agreement. "How about a smaller dog?" the butler suggested, looking hopefully at the mistress. But Averia emphatically stated that she liked this particular dog, and that was out of the question. "Unqualified! Unquestionably! No matter what!" the girl said confidently, glaring at the servants with a fiery gaze. Of course they could not object to this wish of the Duke's own daughter. Averia took the big dog in her arms and shook him from side to side, showing that she was sure to keep him. Someone expressed the opinion that we should first find out who lost the dog. And if the owner wasn't found, then they could keep it. That was a victory for Avery. She knew that the dog had only one owner. Herself. Suddenly the girl heard a whimper. What was that? The sound of crying? Oh, it was the butler crying with emotion. "Madam, it is a miracle wrought by a good heart," he said admiringly. He kept whimpering aloud and marveling at the fact that a mistress with such a low level of magical ability had spared them all from the cold. The cook remarked that they didn't have to worry about firewood now. "No!" Averia exclaimed, and emphasized that she did it because she was freezing herself. The servants unanimously declared that they knew they could not trust the rumors from the capital. They asked the lady to forgive them for their misconceptions. "What you're even talking about isn't that important," Averia stammered. "You are so gracious," the butler continued to gasp with tears in his eyes. He then started jumping around the entire hall in joy, despite his age, and shouting that now they just had to spread fire throughout the mansion. In his opinion, everyone would just be grateful to the mistress for that. "All right, then." Averia agreed confusedly as she watched the butler scurry away. But the girl had mixed feelings in her heart. That went well, though, didn't it? Governor of Errol, Baronin Seach's room, he reflected on a recent event. The fire that burned the black acacia tree made the man think. The daughter of House Oberon tried to hide it, but her power... Everyone was told that Lady Averia's magical powers were small, but the Baron himself was more than certain that this was Duke Oberon's strategy. The Oberon family boasts a history and power comparable to royalty. But what if we assume that a child with even greater strength could have been born? Insedia could hardly believe that Averia had managed to hide it until now. It even occurred to him that the Duke wanted to test the legend of the North with the help of his daughter, Lady Averia. Here, in the northernmost part of Arella, a new flame should help finally banish their suffering. Night had fallen. The big, round moon rolled into the sky and shone its dim light all around. The star-studded sky looked like a huge, shiny blanket. Averia was already lying in her cozy bed, her dog Harry nestled beside her. The candle burning on the bedside table crackled, making the room feel cozy. Averia seemed to be already sleeping sweetly and unconcernedly. Harry had turned back into a man. And now he was sitting so close to the girl, looking at her, wondering if she had really fallen asleep. "This is all just absurd," the boy muttered unhappily, looking at Averia. He remembered how Mistress had behaved today before she fell asleep. Averia kept trying to coax the dog off the bed. "Harry, I'm going to go to bed, so get off," she grumbled unhappily. The dog continued to sit stubbornly in place. Then the girl grabbed him by the legs and tried to pull him away, resenting the fact that this devilish creature was pretending to be a real dog. But Harry was stubborn, because he didn't want to go on the couch. Still, when everything settled down, Averia immediately fell into a deep sleep. She was so excited, but she fell asleep instantly. Maybe it's because she's still young, the Archmage reasoned quietly to himself. He touched his fingers gently to Averia's palm, and Harry unclasped her hand. He was so curious to know what his summoner wanted. Of course, she'd said she didn't need anything right now. But Harry knew the sooner Averia came up with her wish, the sooner the demon would take great pleasure. Something distracted Harry, and he abruptly removed his hand from his mistress's palm. The young man looked anxiously at the door. Some suspicious rustling could be heard there. What could it be? Averia fidgeted on the bed. A thin beam of light shone through the ajar door. Harry decided to wake Avery. He began to shake the girl, asking her to wake up. The girl opened her eyes with difficulty. She rubbed her face sleepily and wondered what was wrong. Harry said there was someone in the living room. Averia grasped the Archmage's shoulder fearfully. "It's not an assassin, is it?" she asked excitedly. Harry hummed in response. "An assassin? Who would want one anyway?" he said. "These things to do. I'm Avery, after all." The girl finished the sentence Harry had started. Averia walked out of the room and found the maid. But what is she doing by the fireplace at this late hour? "What are you doing there?" the young mistress inquired. The girl bounced from the fireplace like a stung girl. The maid seemed to be very frightened. Mistress!" the girl cried out in horror, and looked at Averia with eyes full of fear and tears. "Isn't your name Emma?" the mistress clarified, coming closer with a lantern in hand. The maid stared worriedly and remained silent. Waiting for an answer, Averia stepped even closer. Emma, however, threw her hands up in the air, closing herself off from her mistress as if she wanted to finish her off. "Please, please spare me!" she wailed like a madwoman. Averia looked at Harry with some bewilderment. "Am I really that intimidating?" she said, as if she wanted to ask the dog. There is a little bit," one could read in Harry's eyes. After coming to her senses a little, Emma admitted that she was in a desperate situation, which was why she was thinking about stealing. As she sat down in the chair, Averia asked her maid what she was going to take. Emma stammered and tried to answer the young mistress, but Averia cut her off at half a word, saying that she didn't need to say anything, but could just take what she wanted and leave. "Excuse me?" the maid interjected in a stupor. Averia's words seemed to shock her. Averia, on the other hand, declared that the stuff in this house was of absolutely no importance to her, especially if Emma was so desperate to steal it. And just the lady was about to add something more, when Emma suddenly asked if she could even take fire from the fireplace in that case. "What? Fire?" Averia was taken aback. Apparently you can't after all," Emma sighed doomfully. Averia hesitated for a moment. Then she wondered what about the flames they wanted to spread during the day. The maid explained that the Baron had forbidden the fire to be taken outside the mansion. Moreover, even inside the house, he said to use it only when necessary. This turn of events puzzled Averia. What to do? The Baron must have a reason why he's so concerned with the safety of the fire. She mused aloud. But can it be more important than the lives of people who die of starvation? Added Averia immediately. Perhaps the girl knew how to get out of the situation. She decided that the Baron should have no complaints if she carried this fire herself. The young mistress asked Emma to guide her to the right place, and they walked out of the mansion accompanied by the dog. I think there's someone at the gate." "Mistress, as expected, there's a guard there," Emma remarked in a whisper. But it didn't seem to bother Averia in the slightest. "Come," the lady's maid called after her with a firm assurance in her voice. As soon as they reached the gate, the guard immediately opened it and stepped out to meet the girls. "What's going on here?" he asked. "You are working hard at this late hour," Averia addressed the guard. Oh, he was surprised to hear the mistress herself speaking to him. Averia told the boy in a commanding voice to open the gate. "We're going for a walk," she explained, seeing that the guard was shocked at his appearance and order. "A walk? At a time like this?" the guard asked, surprised. And then Avery had a great idea. She pointed to Harry's dog and emphasized that the little one was begging for a walk. The dog barked affirmatively. "Since that's the case, it's better for me." The guard offered his option, but then something unexpected happened. The dog jumped up and grabbed his arm with its teeth. Oh, with surprise and shock, the boy shrieked and fell to the ground. "Harry is not allowed!" Lady Averia reprimanded the dog and slapped him lightly. "As you can see, there's no way he's going with anyone but me," the girl addressed the guard. "But the Baron ordered it, and it's very late." The boy began to justify himself, stammering. He looked fearfully at his mistress and looked utterly confused. "How dare you!" Averia suddenly burst out. Oh, this suddenness frightened even Harry, who could not get used to her fiery temper. Averia looked menacing, grim, like a dark storm cloud from which lightning was about to fly. "How dare you block my path!" shouted Averia, pausing clearly after each word. Everyone present flinched at the sound of her voice. Although she was very formidable on the outside, inside she wanted to laugh at people's reactions to her character. At least some good will come out of this villainous image, she thought. The guard began to beg the mistress in a trembling voice not to cut off his fingers. This strange request surprised Averia. She questioned what the guard meant by it. "Rumor has it that mistress's hobby is making stuffed animals out of her fingers," Emma whispered in the lady's ear. "And what do they expect me to do with them afterward?" Averia turned toward the maid in surprise. Emma replied that she hadn't specified, so she didn't know. "And I don't know because I've never done it," the mistress pointed out indignantly. This confession seemed to surprise the maid. She asked in shock, "Did the lady really not do it?" The gate creaked open, and Averia, along with Emma the dog, walked past the guard. The young mistress told Emma to show the way. She went ahead, lighting the way with her lantern. Only the guard remained standing at the gate, shaking his head in confusion. He seemed to have decided that he couldn't just stand idly by. The boy rushed over to the girls, and in a shrill voice suggested that they go together to walk the dog. Averia was surprised to see the guard at her side again. The girl angrily asked why he had followed them. "Because it's late and dangerous," the boy replied, out of breath from running. "I guess we're not the only ones in danger right now," Averia remarked, jabbing a finger in the direction of the manor. There was silence for a moment. The guard looked back. He looked first at the open gate, then at the young lady. He seemed even more confused now. He looked pleadingly at Averia and asked what should he do now. Averia sighed heavily and slapped her forehead in frustration. She asked the guard to keep his nose clean and let him follow them. "If you get in trouble, I'll say I dragged you along myself," Averia added. The guard was so moved by this kindness that he almost cried with surprise. Shelter. As they approached the door of one house, Emma announced that this was the place where she had spent her entire childhood. There's still some way for an adult to survive in these conditions, but there are only children here, right? The maid said excitedly as she leaned against the door. Emma opened the doors carefully, and a heartbreaking picture appeared before Averia's eyes. The girl literally shuddered at what she saw. A bunch of kids were gathered on the floor in the middle of the room. God, how miserable they looked. They were all huddled together, wrapped in one large but thin blanket, in thin shirts and barefoot. The sight made me want to weep. "Sister Emma!" one little girl exclaimed and stepped out of the crowd. "If it's that bad, a lot of people must have died of hypothermia by now," Harry observed. Only Averia understood him. To the others, Harry's voice was the usual whining of a dog. "I see," Averia said. Then she turned to Lord Lionel, and giving him a piece of black acacia, ordered him to throw it into the fireplace. The lad obeyed at once. The fireplace already held neatly stacked wood from the black acacia trees they had collected on their way to the orphanage. One of the girls came up to Emma, and in a quiet voice remarked that this wood didn't burn after all. "Don't worry, I know a way," Emma reassured the girl. Such words, of course, greatly surprised the children. The girl who had come up to Emma looked back as she heard footsteps approaching. Yes. It was the young mistress who walked confidently to the fireplace. For some reason, all the children were frightened at the mere sight of Averia. As the lady walked with the lantern in her hands, the children tried to keep their distance. One girl even threw herself into Emma's arms to hide her in her arms. That's what happens when you have the face of a villain, Averia thought. Having made all the necessary preparations before kindling the fireplace, the lady was informed that everything was ready. "Now fire!" said Lady Averia solemnly. The young lady went toward the fireplace, and the children scattered out of her way. The little ones looked on with such apprehension and trembling. Giving in to fear and panic, the children started a stampede. The loud sound of a falling object stopped the commotion. The room was very quiet for a moment. What happened? Averia seems to look upset or even angry. Emma, on the other hand, looked very scared. Turns out the kids, in their attempt to get out of Avery's way, ran into each other, and they happened to knock the fire lantern out of the young mistress's hands. What do we do now? What an irony of fate! The children to whom this fire was so hurriedly delivered became the reason why this fire went out. The girls immediately ran to Emma and hid behind her in terror. Averia stood in a stupor, not knowing what to do or say. "The fire that mistress brought with such difficulty," said Emma in a trembling voice full of despair. The maid cried, and the girls took turns comforting her. One told Emma not to cry, while the other kept saying it was all her fault. "Emma, looking at you, children cry too," Averia calmly and coldly remarked aloud. Emma, however, continued to sob. The girl was worried about how to deal with the fire now, because the children might just die from the cold. Averia sighed heavily. Ah, what a difficult night tonight. However, the girl already had an idea in her head. The young mistress mentally addressed Harry. The dog intuitively, on some telepathic level, heard the mistress. Of course he did. He's an archmage. Averia used the power of thought to ask Harry to start a fire in the fireplace. Is it going to be all right? There are quite a few witnesses. Theoharis sent his thought to the girl. Maybe he was right about something. But in this situation, Averia just didn't see any other option. The children continued to cry, grabbing at poor Emma's dress. An air of despair and fear hung around that this cold would never now end. Averia closed her eyes. Somewhere behind the dog's shell, the demon Theoharis grinned. He was glad to finally hear his summoner's wish. Something sparked in the room, and sparks reflected in the panes of the orphanage windows. The fire in the fireplace suddenly burst into a bright flame and began to crackle pleasantly, slowly devouring the black acacia logs. The children looked at these wonders with amazement. God! It seems that they still can't believe that all this has really happened, and that this cold, empty fireplace has finally come to life, and will now give its warmth to the walls of the orphanage. The girl who was braver than the rest looked at Averia with admiration. "Sis, are you a sorceress?" She addressed the young mistress, no longer afraid. Averia pressed a finger to her lips and asked that the event remain a shared takina. The girl happily nodded her head in agreement. "Emma, Lord Lionel, keep everything that happened today a secret," Averia asked the guard and maid. Those with one voice promised to keep the secret. Averia headed for the exit and called the guard after her. Emma was allowed to return tomorrow afternoon. The maid thanked her mistress heartily. "Lord, you dropped your sword," Averia remarked at the door. Emma stayed with the children. Her thoughts about mistress had changed drastically from today. Truth be told, when she learned that she was to become Averia's maid, Emma had become completely desperate because of the terrible rumors. But today, mistress revealed her secret and helped a complete stranger. This generous act of kindness touched Emma's heart. And now she, Emma, has decided that she will serve mistress faithfully for the rest of her life. The next day, as soon as Averia woke up, the servants began to visit her one by one. A servant girl was the first to arrive and inquire if she had slept comfortably. Then the butler also looked into Averia's room. He wanted to know if the lady liked the food. Even the gardener, trimming the trees outside the window, couldn't pass up the chance to avoid speaking to the lady. "What a lovely day, isn't it?" he remarked with a smile as he looked out the window. Everywhere Averia stepped, she was under the scrutiny of the attendants. "Mistress, mistress, mistress!" was heard from everywhere. This was getting tiresome for the girl. Tired of the constant attention, Averia ran out the door. She had hoped to get away from the servants and get some peace and quiet. The girl ran into one of the rooms and slammed the door behind her. But she wasn't alone here either. As soon as she was outside the door and breathed out a sigh of relief, the maid who was in the room suddenly asked what had happened to the lady. With some irritation and bewilderment, Averia wondered why everyone was so friendly all of a sudden. The maid explained that it was because the people who worked at the manor were locals. This morning, Averia decided to visit the Baron and ask him why he wasn't handing out fire. After all, these people are all residents of this land. The girl stated that unless he had some special reason for not allowing everyone to use the fire, in that case she herself would share the flame with all the inhabitants. It seems that many people knew about this conversation. "Mistress, you personally conducted this negotiation, didn't you?" asked Emma, and emphasized that mistress couldn't even imagine how grateful everyone around her was. The girl joyfully declared that now they recognized the true face of the mistress. Averia was not used to hearing such flattering words in her direction. "One way or another, I had to do what was right in my conscience," mistress said with a sigh as she plopped down in her chair. Harry had been by her side the whole time. Emma motioned for Averia to fetch some tea, and without waiting for a response, she headed for the exit. But as soon as she opened the door, the girl was immediately confronted by another maid. Both girls froze in bewilderment. Averia looked at Emma in surprise and wondered what was wrong. The maid looked puzzled. In a surprised voice, Emma announced that Prince Cassian had arrived to meet the lady. Oh, it seems the maid wasn't the only one surprised by this visit. Averia looked quite surprised as well. What's the sudden need for Prince Cassian himself? What an unexpected guest! Cassian's appearance as an uninvited guest surprised Averia. Why had he suddenly arrived if they had broken up? Averia remembered how she had promised him last time that this would be their last meeting. The girl wondered. I wonder if there was something like that in the original novel. Given that everything always revolved around Catherine, they might not have written a single word about it. Averia really hoped that this cash-in wouldn't cause much trouble. "Long time no see, Averia," the prince pronounced as soon as he opened the door. The girl furrowed her eyebrows. Cassian noticed that she looked much better now compared to when she had been in the capital. The prince sipped his tea as he sat back in his chair. He looked at the girl with a glowing gaze and smiled. Yes, of course. It was hard to argue that he was handsome enough. Everything about him was flawless, from the ends of his hair to the buttons on his camisole. "Have you arrived incognito?" Averia inquired. The girl thought to herself that if Cassian had more brains, he would have realized that anyone could tell that he was the crown prince. "What's the matter?" the girl asked, catching Cassian's intense gaze. "It's even more amazing to see it with your own eyes. It's amazing that living in such a wilderness, you're doing so well," the prince remarked in amazement. The girl noted with a smile that it was about Averia Oberon herself, after all. "And yet I'm not around," Cassian observed. Averia stared at the guy in bewilderment. What the hell? What was wrong with him? A mute question lingered in the girl's eyes. "Just kidding, and that's enough." Averia couldn't stand it, and wondered why Cassian had come after all. The prince replied that he was here to see Averia. Cassian thought that the girl was purposely pretending that everything was fine. In fact, he thought, Averia must be very lonely without him. Now something was clearer to the girl. Was this how he had been able to deceive Averia and keep her close to him all this time? But she had done everything for Cassian, blinded by love. Things are different now. Averia isn't what it used to be. Looking at Cassian, the girl realized that her Harry was much more attractive. With these thoughts, Averia leaned over and stroked the white dog's head. Cassian watched in amazement. "I came to comfort you, for I thought your heart was broken," declared the prince. Averia, however, replied that in that case he had come in vain. "Is the breaking of our engagement such a serious problem for Averia Oberon herself?" the girl asked and smiled. "Ev!" the prince exclaimed, jumping up from his seat. Averia looked at Cassian apprehensively, wondering why he had given her such a nickname. Cassian admitted that he didn't know he was capable of feeling love for someone, so he got engaged to her. "But when I met Catherine, I couldn't even imagine marrying anyone but her," the prince added. Averia wondered with an amazed face. Did the prince really want her to congratulate them? "That's right, Averia! Wish us a happy future!" exclaimed Cassian. The girl looked at the prince like he was crazy. What the hell is he talking about?" "You'd love to bless us, wouldn't you?" The prince couldn't settle down. He stood and looked at Averia expectantly. The girl was in a stupor, not understanding what he was saying. Cassian slowly approached Averia's chair. He came right up to the girl and touched her face with his hand. Averia froze in surprise. "Your father refused to support the mining business, Ev," Cassian stated, looking the girl straight in the eye. The prince also picked up on the fact that he's been having a lot of trouble lately because of Averia. God, what is he getting at? "If you decide to cooperate with me, it will be difficult to make you queen," Cassian said quietly as he leaned in. He then whispered in Averia's ear with a smile that he could offer something else in return. Oh, now his true intentions had finally reached her. In the eastern part of the empire are untouched magical mines. There are supposed to be huge deposits of stone there, but no one has taken it on due to the high cost of development. However, the Crown Prince's faction, sponsored by the Oberon family, took on the development of the mine. They tried to gain supremacy against the first prince. But of course, after the engagement broke up, the Oberon family ended their sponsorship. Averia wondered, wasn't that why Cassian had rushed here in such a hurry? It seemed to her that the cold-blooded Duke would not have listened to his daughter's request, even under such dire circumstances. Harry, who until then had been sitting quietly next to the lady's chair, suddenly became furious. He was furious at what this man was doing to his summoner. The dog barked, and Cassian jumped away from the chair in horror. The prince did so abruptly and clumsily that he fell straight to the floor. Averia asked Harry in quiet shock if he had done it. "Well, who else would?" the archmage in the body of a dog replied. Prince Cassian slowly stepped back from what had happened and asked in bewilderment, "What was that? And what the hell was it anyway?" Averia looked at the prince. He looked very frightened. God, that look could be more eloquent than any words. "I don't know why you'd think I'd be happy about such an offer," the girl stated with a smile. "You probably didn't even think about it, but I'm not attracted to you now," Averia added, looking into Cassian's eyes. The boy looked at Averia with complete incomprehension. He didn't seem to expect to hear that. Averia, on the other hand, emphasized that on the contrary, he himself now had to beg her to get what he wanted. Such humiliation Cassian was not prepared to experience here. Used to getting what he wanted all the time, and always having a loving Averia at his fingertips, he was now completely bewildered. Abruptly opening the door, Cassian stepped out from Averia and announced to his escorts that they were all returning to the capital. "I won't see you off," said Averia with a smile as she looked out of the door. Panting with anger and resentment, Cassian went to the stairs leading downstairs. "Oh, what's that?" As if some invisible force pushed the prince to his feet, he stumbled and lost his balance. Cassian shrieked in horror and rolled down the stairs. Oh, how loudly he fell down, counting all the steps with his ribs. The prince's assistants immediately rushed to his aid with anxious cries. "Harry, is that you again?" Averia turned to the dog with a question. Harry seemed pretty happy. He asked Averia how she liked this job of his. She stroked the dog and kissed him on the face and thanked him profusely. If dogs could blush, Harry's face would blush with embarrassment. But before Harry could even recover from the feeling he had just experienced, Averia quickly turned around and rushed to where Cassian had fallen. Oh, the prince did land on the landing. His servants were beside him, all trying to help him up. "You seem to be getting tired a lot lately. You fell down recently too, didn't you? Apparently it's because your legs are weakened. It's very disturbing," Averia said aloud, and the prince shuddered at the sound of her voice. "Although a weak body isn't the end of the world. Hang in there," she added with a smile, smiling at the prince from upstairs. After Prince Cassian left, tea was brought to the lady. A nice addition to the tea party were delicious desserts to choose from. How appetizing! Averia stretched contentedly and smiled happily. Harry had regained his human form, and as long as no one else was present, he could lie on his mistress's lap in that form. Harry wondered if his summoner was satisfied. Of course the girl was pleased. After all, they had managed to get rid of the man who was talking nonsense. "Really? I see. It's good that at least the summoner is happy, but I'm sad," Harry remarked with a heavy sigh. The young man lay pensive and ran his fingers through his mistress's curls. Ivrea, on the other hand, couldn't stop marveling aloud at the wonderful flavor of the tea. The summoner is how pleased she is that she can taste the tea without making a single tray. I, on the other hand, am sad and wistful. Theohara stretched out in a dejected voice. Ivrea took a sip of the warm drink and mused aloud that the archmage said the same thing every day. Yes, the demon Theoharas's main desires were to shed blood or start a war. And he said so repeatedly. Harry explained that it was because he couldn't satisfy his desires. With those words, he stared thoughtfully at one point and began chewing on a strand of Avery's hair. The archmage said that he had even dealt with the prince for the sake of the summoner. The archmage noted that he had even dealt with that fool prince for the summoner's sake. But it angered him terribly that the summoner didn't even ask if he himself was okay. "Yeah, I get it. So stop chewing my hair," the girl asked with a smile. "You're going to let me kill?" Theoharis asked, with some wild hope in his gaze, jumping up abruptly from his seat. Instead of answering, the girl simply stroked the Archmage's head. The boy was taken aback for a moment by such sudden tenderness. "You're a good girl, Harry. Thank you." Everia praised Theoharis as she continued to stroke him. The boy shook his head indignantly and asked the girl to stop. He asked if she still mistook him for a dog. But Averia noted with a smile that his hair was very nice. He stared at her in disbelief and wondered what that had to do with it. In Theoharis's opinion, Averia should find out what a great demon he is. The girl nodded her head and replied that she knew that very well. Then she decided to change the subject and suggested she'd rather eat more cake. But Harry thought she knew nothing and understood nothing. Averia, meanwhile, was standing in front of the Archmage with a cake in her hands and smiling sweetly. Glancing at the young man, Averia remarked aloud that he takes whatever he is given, by the way. "Notice how surprised the maids are every time we eat?" she asked. Averia assumed that the maids were now thinking about the fact that she herself was eating 10 servings at a time. Harry listened in silence, devouring the sweets with both cheeks. As she slowly ate her piece of cake, Averia noticed that, contrary to what the maids had guessed, it was Harry who was eating all the food. Once again, the boy reminded her that he couldn't satisfy his desires, so he had to eat his stress. Averia looked at Theoharis in amazement. A mute question lingered in her gaze. Harry explained that for a demon, killing is a basic need. He compared it to the desire for food in humans. "I won't die if I don't destroy, but it's a torment akin to death," he stated bitterly. For Averia, these words proved to be a revelation. The girl sighed heavily and said that she understood now. At the same time, Harry remarked that it looked like he would have to eat like a pig all his life to keep from dying. Licking the pastry spatula, the Archmage furrowed his eyebrows and stated that he was really trying hard, though you might not be able to tell it from him. The young mistress wondered if he could use slightly different methods. "Other methods?" questioned Harry in surprise. The words seemed to make him think. There was silence in the room for a while. Averia looked questioningly at Theoharis, waiting for an answer. "There are, aren't there?" Averia, unable to bear to be silent any longer, began to press the Archmage. She wanted to know if there were any other ways besides food. Harry recoiled from the girl and took his gaze away from her. Of course, Averia's behavior made him even more eager to know what he was silent about. The girl motioned to Harry and in an orderly tone told him to speak immediately. "Well? What is it? Speak! Come on!" she pleaded, losing patience. Unable to withstand his mistress's onslaught, Harry admitted that anything suited him. But the main thing was that it should be pleasurable. He blushed. An awkward silence hung in the air. Averia stared at the young man in bewilderment and wondered what it could be. "Oh, I guess demons have their weaknesses, too." Apparently, Harry couldn't discuss all topics so openly either. After a long pause, the Archmage asked how old the girl was. Averia replied that she was 18 and pointed out that she was of age this year. Yeah, you're still such a child, so I'm not telling you anything." Theoharis brushed it off. But after his answer, Averia wanted to know just how old Harry was. Theoharis proudly announced that he was already 2,176 years old. "Geez, Harry, you're a grandfather, aren't you?" wondered Averia. Such a nickname angered Harry. The Archmage emphasized that he didn't actually age like humans. "That's something I can't do to you anyway, so stop questioning me," he requested. Those words puzzled the young mistress even more. The curiosity in her was only growing. Black Forest. In the land of Errol, in the Black Forest, there is one place where wyverns dwell. Wyverns are aggressive carnivores that resemble powerful dragons. Since they prey on humans, it is crucial to control their numbers. This is done by destroying their eggs before they hatch. This is what the lady was told by Emma. However, according to her, It is not easy to do it. Therefore, every year they receive help from the royal family. The girl emphasized that if the northern trade route was attacked, the royal family would suffer losses due to the supply route being cut off. Oh, now a lot of things in Averia's head were starting to fall into place. So that's why Catherine's 2 fish came to such a backwater, she thought. First, Prince Leiden Geraint, known for his sordid relationship with Averia, and the king's knight, Commander Elroyce. As we know, he didn't get along with the young mistress either. In this novel, there was a certain set of rules and laws of chivalry, and the main conspirator and villain who made an attempt on Catherine's life was Averia. In the original novel, El despised Averia, but since he was a knight, he could not openly show his attitude towards her. The girl decided for herself that she would not leave her room until those two were gone, anyway. Though since Averia was in the main building and the knights were in the other, she thought they shouldn't run into those two. Ah, that's what Averia thought. But she proved too careless. That soon became clear, just as Averia had met them on their walk. "You look beautiful, Miss Averia Oberon," Leiden greeted the girl with a smile. Averia was already regretting going out for that damn walk. The girl stood looking at the 2 young men in confusion, and it was all Emma's fault. She told me that Arel was famous not only for its cold weather, but also for its hot springs. It was the maid who gave Averia the idea to visit them. Yes, the girl thought that she would be able to avoid the reception, and she was just going to relax in those notorious springs. But fate must have had other plans for her. "I should have stayed in the room," thought Averia regretfully. The hot springs are so close, and Averia had to socialize with these two. Annoyance. Even far away from the springs, their warmth was already felt. Leiden felt the sweat on the back of his neck. "Yes, it's quite hot in here." Averia stated that she didn't expect to meet them here and remarked that she had heard that they were very busy. Leiden emphasized that they are still on duty. He also savvy that Averia looks pretty good for a man who has turned the royal capital upside down. Averia thought for a moment. In fact, before her transmigration into this body, the girl had worked for a trading company. She had to listen to her bosses grumbling all the time there, so she was used to this sort of thing by now. Making a mess of the capital, hiding out in a place like this. What else do you do at your leisure? Leiden continues to pester the girl. Averia thought that if she acted indifferent, they wouldn't be able to continue their attacks. "Now that you're done talking, may I go?" the girl asked calmly, noting that she had come to bathe in the hot springs. "Hot springs? Not bad for you after you tried to send someone to hell," pestered Averia Leiden. The girl sighed doomedly, realizing he wasn't done yet. Pausing briefly and looking up into the sky, Averia decided to address the prince. "Look, Prince, has that man's life turned into a total nightmare?" "I don't think so," the lady pointed out. Plus, she decided to ask if they had abandoned their brides by cheating on them with the one. Those words hurt Leiden, but he couldn't find anything to say in response to the truth. Averia thought about the fact that she wouldn't take the crown prince back anyway. However, the girl still said aloud that she realized that she had used unacceptable methods. Oh, such speeches seemed to surprise the prince more and more the more Averia spoke. Summarizing, the girl said in a confident voice that she was going to live in Arella for the rest of her life, atoning for her sins. "Or maybe you don't believe that villains are capable of reforming themselves?" she asked. The girl wondered if they believed that once you do a bad deed once, you're a villain forever. Leiden looked at Averia in bewilderment. He seemed to see some wisdom and sanity in her for the first time. Averia, however, continued to speak. "It seems the prince who is supposed to care for his people is throwing himself from extreme to extreme," she remarked. Averia stated that as a resident of the kingdom, she was getting misgivings about this. After that, she got ready to leave. A short time later, Averia was already soaking in the wonderfully warm water of the spring. Oh, it felt so good. The water seemed to warm, heal, and relieve anxiety and fatigue. It was a delight. "Oh, yes, just the thing!" Averia cheered aloud, talking to herself. "But Harry, why are you so far away?" Averia sent a question to the Archmage. Oh, he really was far away. Harry was sitting on one of the towers and didn't dare to even turn towards his mistress. He replied to Averia that he was comfortable there as well. It's too far away. We should look at each other's eyes when we talk. The mistress expressed her opinion, but he continued to ignore the girl and stood with his back to her. Averia called out loudly to Harry and suggested that they bathe together in the hot springs. I said I wouldn't, repeated Theocarus. Averia smiled slyly. Ah, are you shy? She asked. Oh, that question made Harry flinch and blush. Averia laughed out loud, saying that it appeared that Grandpa Harry was so innocent despite his imposing age. Don't call me grandfather, the Archmage burst out. He even seemed to growl with indignation. The words had worked on Harry after all. Soon he appeared next to the source. That's enough. Get out already, he said. Averia didn't understand why he was acting this way. The girl looked at Harry with a puzzled expression and a mute question in her eyes. Before she knew it, Averia was in Theocarus's arms. She shrieked in surprise, and Harry insisted that they had to go. Glancing at Theocarus, Averia met his gaze. It was so exciting. He has such a deep gaze. A few seconds, and Harry put the girl on the ground. Her bare feet touched the cold stones. Feeling around herself, Averia found that her clothes were completely dry. Oh, it's all dry? So soft and gentle. How is that possible? The girl marveled. Theocarus stood nearby and smiled smugly. He explained that it happened that way, with the help of magic, of course. At first glance, it seems easy to evaporate moisture from your body, but you have to be very careful, Harry remarked. Wow, you're just like a hairdryer, Averia said admiringly. Fen. The word appeared unfamiliar and incomprehensible to the Archmage. He wondered with surprise, who else was this Fen? Averia explained that it wasn't a person, but a contraption that dried hair. However, Harry didn't seem to quite understand her. You call people with that kind of ability a hairdryer? He asked. Then I must be the best hairdryer ever? Queried Harry, emphasizing that no one but him could dry so perfectly. Averia again wanted to say that a hairdryer wasn't a person, but realized that would be useless. The girl decided that she would probably just go along with it. She was too lazy to continue this conversation, so she told Harry that he was the best hairdryer in the world. Theocarus smiled contentedly. He was very flattered to hear the praise. When Averia was dressed, Harry took on the form of a dog again, and they walked together toward the manor. Oh, I think someone is standing nearby. Averia stopped. She recognized the person. Lord Elroyce, the girl called out to the young man. He stopped and looked at Averia. For some reason the Lord looked very upset. The man lowered his sad gaze and made a slight bow in greeting. With that, Elroyce turned around and walked off in his own direction. Averia was left standing in a stupor. She didn't understand. Would he just leave like that? Is this type a Royce family puppy? Harry asked. Yep, Averia replied. Harry noticed that for some reason this guy reminded him of the kid who stood next to the jerk who'd called him out last time. And especially Harry remembered Elroy's terseness. You know, at first I thought he couldn't talk at all. Those were his first words in 3 months, remarked Harry, observing that the native blood did not seem to be deceived. The girl knew that Al had been made taciturn in the affair itself. Ha ha ha. The descendants of that silent one don't speak to this day, Harry observed, and wondered ironically if they had traded the ability to speak for the ability to wield a sword. The Archmage concluded that the jerk's offspring were jerks, too. I see you like Sir El very much. I'm disappointed, Averia said. Harry didn't deny it. After all, in his opinion, Ella is a strong kid. Strong people are so interesting, Harry remarked with a laugh. Averia squinted at him and asked if he thought she was boring because she was weak. Harry replied that he thought so because he thought Averia simply had no ambition. Theocarus thought that a girl could be helped by conquering the world, for example. Averia replied that it would be better for her to just be boring. It was late evening. The moon came into the sky and showed its round white face. Averia walked to the door to her room and yawned loudly. "It's so sleepy after the hot springs." Mistress turned to Emma and told her that she would probably go to bed. Opening the door to the bedroom, Averia froze in a stupor. What the hell is this? Theoharis was lying on the bed, slumped over in a businesslike manner. He was already in his pajamas and didn't seem to be getting up. Averia wondered what he was doing there. The girl tiredly admitted that she was very sleepy and asked Harry to stop fooling around. She told him to leave, but Harry insisted that they usually slept together. Averia remarked that it was like that when Harry was a dog. She asked again to stop fooling around, but Theoharis stated that he wasn't joking at all. "I was totally serious when I said I wanted blood too, but you ignore me every day." Harry resented her as he continued to lie stubbornly on the bed. He thought Averia needed to feel how agonizing it was to hold back your base needs too. Averia seemed to have run out of energy to argue. She was completely exhausted. "I'd listen to you whine some more, but I'm so sleepy," the girl said, and taking a pillow, staggered away from the bed. Harry jumped up and looked at the departing Avery in a stupor. Where was she going? "Good night, Harry," Averia whispered softly, laid down on the couch, and instantly fell into sleep. Harry wanted to whimper in frustration. That wasn't what he'd meant. "Caller, it seems I have reached my limit," Theoharis said through clenched teeth as he looked at the sleeping girl. The fireplace crackled cozily in the room. The warm atmosphere enveloped the room with a special comfort. Moonlight through the window crept into the room and rays illuminated the desk. Theoharis leaned over the sleeping Averia and stared at her like a madman without taking his eyes off her. Oh God, as if she felt the stare, she woke up. With sleepy eyes, Averia looked straight ahead and was surprised to see Harry so close. God, what was he doing? "Now you've decided to harass me like this?" she asked, surprised, resting her hands on Harry's shoulders. The girl generously allowed Harry to whine all she wanted, but she was adamantly against starting a war. "You're so heavy. Get off of me!" Averia exasperated, trying to push the Archmage off of her. And it was only now that she seemed to realize something was wrong. Harry was different somehow. It was like he couldn't hear what she was saying to him. God, that look. It's like it's looking into my soul, a look of longing for something. But Averia couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. What's going on? Harry is weird, Averia thought. She looked at the boy apprehensively and asked if he could hear her. Theoharis was silent. He held the girl tightly by the shoulders as if she were his prey. What the hell was going on? Averia was worried and asked Harry once again if everything was all right. Theoharis leaned right up to the girl's very face. Averia even felt the warm breath of his lips. What did he want? It might even seem as if he was about to kiss her. Breathing heavily, Harry suddenly admitted he was having such a hard time and bowed his head to the girl. He lowered himself right down to the tender white neck of the young mistress, and closing his eyes, he bit Averia. "Oh, what's the matter with you, Harry?" He seemed to have completely lost control of himself. Averia froze in bewilderment. Harry lost control of himself and grinded his teeth against the girl's skin like an enchanted man trying to bite through it. Averia called the Archmage by name, but he mumbled something inaudible. "I'm addressing you!" the girl said louder, sensing something amiss. Harry continued his own, not reacting to anything. Averia decided that she needed to act drastically in this situation. She clenched her hand into a fist and swatted the loopy Archmage hard. "Get a grip!" she shrieked. "Oh, I think it's working!" With one deft kick, Averia managed to get Harry off her back. The boy recovered from the sudden pain. He jerked away from the girl and grabbed his head. "It hurts! You what? Did you just hit me now?" wailed Harry. Looks like he really did get hurt, as the guy's eyes glazed over. Averia looked back at Theoharis and wondered if he had come to his senses after all. Why beat a demon who didn't even do anything? He resented her, moving away from Avery to the edge of the couch just in case. Yeah, she'd felt it all too well, the doing nothing part. "Of course you did! You almost ate me!" remarked Averia angrily, opening up and showing Harry the mark of his teeth on her neck. Harry stared dumbfounded at Avery. Oh, he looked very surprised. It seemed that he couldn't believe either what the girl had said or what he had seen with his own eyes. "Me? Is it me?" Theoharis began to ask in a stupor, eyes bulging. Averia looked at the Archmage in disbelief and wondered if he didn't remember anything at all. "Yep, nothing at all," Theoharis confirmed, confused. He stared at Averia's neck in bewilderment, trying to figure out how he had gotten his teeth marks on it. From Hari's reaction, she could tell that he probably wasn't lying. Averia didn't know what to think. "I told you I've reached my limit," said Theoharis reproachfully, adding that he couldn't have known something like this would happen. "Is that why you pounced on me to eat me?" asked Averia, being outraged that he was also shifting the blame. Harry noticed that he didn't usually act like this. After all, he said, he was a demon with a high level of self-control and self-control. But the Archmage also admitted that it was the first time he had gone without blood for so long, and that he was going crazy. Averia was desperate about the situation she found herself in. She could end up being eaten by an ogre demon, suffering for her unsatisfied desires. She just couldn't understand why she had to go through all this? Harry looked at the girl guiltily, like a guilty dog. The girl remarked aloud that one way or another they needed to find some solution to this problem. They had to think hard about it. She pointed out that Harry continued to act like an annoying match. "But I'm the best hairdryer!" the Archmage exasperated. Averia, on the other hand, emphasized the considerable expense required to maintain it. In the morning, they went straight to the library. Together with Harry, Averia had collected a lot of literature from the shelves. They had already reviewed much of it, and there was still a lot of information left to learn. But so far, everything they'd found didn't fit at all. "An unparalleled power to exact revenge. World domination. No, it wasn't that." A pile of books flew off to the side. She stretched tiredly and straightened her back, and wondered why everyone called on demons only for something big like revenge, or to take over the world. Harry explained that it was normal, but he also noted that no one had ever summoned a demon to start a fire. Averia now looked guiltily at Theoharis and asked, puzzled as to how to find a solution to his problem now. In Harry's opinion, the easiest thing to do would be to actually start a war. But Averia disagreed with that. She didn't understand why Harry continued to be stubborn while she was doing everything she could for him. The Archmage only smiled at those words. He thought that all this fuss was due to the fact that Averia simply didn't want to be eaten. "Of course. Do you think anyone would volunteer for something like that?" she asked reproachfully, and showed the boy the teeth mark on his neck again. Harry clarified that by eat, he doesn't mean like any food. Now that's interesting. What did he mean by that then? "What then? Eh? You want blood and not flesh?" Averia asked. Since that was the case, Averia stated that she could give him some of her blood if needed. This suggestion shocked Theoharis. He stared questioningly at the mistress. Is she even in her right mind? What is this madwoman talking about? Bygones. What can I even talk to this little thing about? Harry sighed doomily and turned away. Averia poked the boy in the shoulder a few times. "I told you I'd give it to you. What are you doing?" She was genuinely perplexed. Their conversation was interrupted by a noise outside the window. Averia was alarmed. The girl looked out the window and noticed the army and Prince Leiden and Lord Elroy there. The crowd of warriors were shouting loudly and enthusiastically, and the prince was standing in front of them and talking about something. Averia had learned that the army would go to fight the Loyalists today. She also realized that it might take a whole month. When Emma had heard about it, she had been surprised herself. The girl had asked indignantly then, would she have to sit in her room all day long to avoid accidentally encountering those fishy things? To which Emma replied that wyverns were vulnerable in sunlight and so could only be defeated around noon, and there's nothing you can do about it. The girl sighed sadly. Why are these wyverns so strong? And at that thought, it suddenly hit Averia. Strong? Harry, wyverns are hard to defeat, aren't they? She asked the Archmage thoughtfully. Harry replied that humans were certainly difficult. After all, he said, even their eggs were hard to break. What about you, Harry? The girl questioned and smiled slyly. Is Harry going to have a hard time, too? She asked again, as if challenging the demon with those words. There was silence. Harry was thinking about something. Summoner, you have no idea of the magical power you and I possess, Harry stated smugly and smiled, shifting his eyebrows. Excellent, the young mistress replied, quite pleased that her words had worked exactly as she had hoped. Harry looked at the girl questioningly. He knew that the beast was up to something, but he just wanted to know what it was. Theoharis, we're going to go scatter to war, declared Averia with a smile. She decided to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, to give Harry what he wanted and to get rid of the dangerous wyverns. Leiden's army stopped near a small forest that was located in front of high mountains. Commander, I think you should take a look at this. One warrior addressed the prince. He called the warlord after him to show him what he had found in the empty wyvern's nest. Lord Elroy and Leiden were dumbfounded by what they saw. They stood in a stupor at the nest of the dangerous creature and didn't know what to say. It turned out that the wyverns had already been exterminated by someone before the prince's army arrived here. They had no idea who was involved. From that day on, the prince decided to keep a particularly close watch on the wyvern place to find out what had happened. Leiden was told that the extermination of the malicious creatures had been going on for a week. The prince became more and more interested and worried about the situation. After all, he knew that even a single wyvern was difficult to destroy, but they died in packs every day. A search party is currently investigating the matter, but there are no results yet, Elroy reported. The prince was terribly curious about this beast that was stronger than the wyverns themselves. He asked the Lord if it would not be better to return the night and request help from the capital. Elroy said he didn't think it was a beast. The prince froze and tapped his fingers nervously on the table. He asked the Lord who he thought it was. Elroy reported that the wyverns' bodies showed signs of fire use. That was something to think about. Leiden noted that the beasts really didn't use fire. Well, all of this gave reason to believe that the wyvern fighter was smart and very strong on top of that. Prince Leiden asked, puzzled as to the likelihood that a human had a hand in this. Left alone, Leiden began to ponder. The first person he decided to consider was Lord Elroyce himself. But the prince was well aware that this man maintained neutrality, which meant he shouldn't have ulterior motives. However, there was a worry about how the royal family would react to all of this.